when, as his statement indicates, he was approached for a meeting with a member of the Gupta family regarding advertising spend with the New Age. And Chair, Ms. Armstrong will spend some time probing that, because that meeting happened at a time and in circumstances that bear a number of similarities to other accounts that this Commission has received in evidence about those interactions in early 2011 and late 2010. Chair, 3 Rule 33 notices were issued in respect of Mr. Mkhwanazi's statement. That was way back earlier this year, because Mr. Mkhwanazi has been waiting expectantly to give his evidence before the Commission. There's only been one response, Chair, and that is from Mr. Malusi Kikaba. It is not an application to cross-examine Mr. Mkhwanazi. He supplies an affidavit setting out his version, and as we've done previously when we've been fortunate enough on our timing to receive an affidavit before a witness gives evidence, Ms. Armstrong will traverse pertinent aspects of Mr. Kikaba's version with Mr. Mkhwanazi this afternoon. Chair, Mr. Mkhwanazi is one of those witnesses whose evidence relevant to the Commission spans more than will be addressed with him today. As we've had to do previously with our focus on TNA, which spans a number of SOEs, we've focused in on the TNA aspects. We focused in with any associated meetings. We'll look at TNA in Transnet and in Eskom with Mr. Mkhwanazi, but other aspects where he may have relevant evidence, particularly in relation to Transnet, will be left for the Transnet work stream to deal with. Chair, the last point from me before I hand over to Ms. Armstrong is to request that Mr. Mkhwanazi's statement be entered as Exhibit MM7. It should be directly in front of you. Now, Chair, it's a very short statement, which is then accompanied by...
That will be together with its annexures, is that right?
It actually doesn't have annexures. It's so short and sweet that it comprises only 2 pages.
What about the A, B, and C that I see?
Yes, so let me explain. That is what we've previously been calling the other documents section. And it comprises the affidavit from Mr. Kikaba, which is going to be put to Mr. Mkhwanazi today. And so those are the attachments to Mr. Kikaba's affidavit, and then certain additional documents. Chair, my learned friend was mindful of the approach you took yesterday to wanting separately to identify the documents. So what we're going to suggest for today is we enter as Exhibit MM7 the statement of Mr. Mkhwanazi, and then for referencing purposes, and that will be A, it'll be MM7A will be the statement. And then as Ms. Armstrong leads you through today, she will use primarily the pagination number to get you to the right page, but then she will give an exhibit number to each of the documents, because there are only a few, and so she can do that actually while she's giving, asking the questions, if that's suitable to you, Chair.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Mr. Mafika Mkhwanazi's statement, is it a statement or affidavit?
It's actually a statement. It's only signed.
Excuse me, will be admitted and marked as Exhibit MM7. Is that right?
Correct, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to quickly sterilize because I'm about to...
Before you do that,
yes.
We haven't done this before.
Correct.
Other than when I had evidence from the international experts right at the beginning
Yes.
Of the hearings in August 2018. So it's necessary that we don't confuse the public about what we do and what we don't do.
Yes.
I understand that Mr. Mkhwanazi made a request.
He did indeed,
That
Chair.
his evidence be heard via Zoom, or is it Zoom? Or
It is actually Zoom today,
yeah,
yes.
okay. I have I've granted leave to that. I understand, and you must just tell me your understanding. I understand that he had concern about traveling because of COVID-19.
Yes, there's a concern about him falling into a risk category, and with the
Yes.
escalating infection rates at the
Yes,
moment,
yes,
his
yes.
request to the Commission was that he remain at his home, as I understand, where he's currently
Yes.
located, and give the evidence from there. It
Yes,
was
but-
particularly related to health concerns.
Yes, but you indicated that for a long time,
Yes.
he has been available and ready
Indeed.
to come and
Since
give
February,
evidence in
Mr.
person.
Mkhwanazi was
Yes,
sitting here many days.
So it is the commission that has not been able to give him the opportunity.
Indeed.
So I've decided to allow that I hear his evidence in this way, on condition that at a certain time when maybe the COVID-19 situation has subsided sufficiently, he would be able to come before the commission in person and confirm under oath in front of me the evidence that will have been transcribed by then.
Indeed,
So
Chair.
can I confirm that the recording will be fine? We will
You
get
can.
a transcript.
We have confirmed that, and
Yes.
that stipulation, Chair,
Yes,
has
yes.
been communicated to Mr. Mkhwanazi.
Yes, and he's
And
happy
he's comfortable with it,
He is
indeed.
comfortable.
Indeed.
Mr. Mkhwanazi, you understand all of that?
Chairman, I do. Thank you very much.
Yes, and you undertake to make yourself available when the
I do,
situation
Chair.
is better.
Yes.
Okay, no, thank you very much. And thank you for making yourself available to give evidence to the commission.
Thank you, Chair. The
Yes.
last just procedural aspect that I always forget is Mr. Mkhwanazi is legally represented.
Yes.
His legal representatives did introduce themselves to you way back when.
Yes,
But I
yes.
wonder if they could just place themselves on record. They are also on the Zoom platform.
Oh, okay. Where is he with
thank you
Mr.
very-
Mkhwanazi or
He's
is he
not
somewhere else?
with him. He's at a separate location. You'll see him second from the end on the top row of, second from the left-hand side. So Mr. Mkhwanazi comes in the frame on the left.
Okay.
And then next to him is also Mr. Mkhwanazi, but spelt with an H,
Okay.
his legal representative. Mr. Mkhwanazi, can I ask you to place yourself on record?
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you very much for affording us this opportunity, finally, to appear before the Chair. We are here with one sole purpose, which is to help the Commission to achieve its objectives in terms of the investigations. And also to mention to you, Chair, specifically to thank you for your indulgence in allowing us to appear before you on this medium, which clearly is becoming a permanent feature of our jury going forward. So thank you very much for that indulgence. And also to state, Chair, that the reason that, as my advocate of mayor just mentioned now, our statement is so short and sweet, the word she used, is because of the amount of time we have spent consulting with the Commission, starting initially with the forensic investigators, and of course, subsequent to that, with the legal team at the Commission. We specifically initially requested that we be given questions that we should focus on. And as we went through the motions, we kept on, correcting and making our statement much more user-friendly, and it's for that reason that it is as short as it is. But I must also mention, Chair, that with regards to Transnet in particular, there were a number of requests that we had made to the previous company secretary at Transnet to see if we could access any board information that were being referred to by the Commission. Unfortunately, we couldn't get any information from Transnet. I believe that company secretary is no longer there, and there's a change of guard and so forth. But I also want to confirm, Chair, that the issues in the main that Mr. Mkhwanazi will be talking to today, both in terms of Transnet and of Eskom, are issues specifically relating to the TNA. And of course, you would recall, Chair, that both at the Transnet and of course, ESCOM and many other institutions, the TNA had agreements there. And of course, Mr. Mkwanazi is ready, willing and able to cooperate with you. So thank you very much, Chair. And we've spent the whole day waiting for you. So we've discussed as much as we could with Mr. Mkwanazi. So I will just, give him the floor, obviously through you, and you, Chair, will.
No, thank you very much, Mr.
If I have a
Mkwanazi.
question, I'll just raise my hand as I speak with the CIO. So thank you very much, Chair and colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name is Ronnie Mkwanazi, and
Yes.
I am the director at Mkwanazi Incorporated. Mr. Mkwanazi and I are in the same building, but of course, he's in the boardroom and I'm in another office just to make sure we observe all protocols relating to COVID-19. So
Yes.
thank you very much, Chair. And also just to also ask for your indulgence in advance that in the event, and you will guide us, Chair, in terms of the procedures of the commission, if we are allowed to, in fact, request for some time out, if I need to discuss something with Mr. Mkwanazi, we will be entirely in your hands in that regard, Chair. So thank you very much for being here today.
Yes, no, that's fine. No, thank you very much. I do hope that nothing will happen that will require that we interrupt Mr. Mkwanazi's evidence for anything, but if something does arise, we will deal with it at that stage.
Thank you, Chair.
I do want to say, you mentioned, you made reference to Transnet and Mr. Mkwanazi and the fact that he has tried to obtain some documents, or you have tried to get some documents. I do know that soon the commission will be communicating with Mr. Mkwanazi with regard to some of the issues at Transnet. And there are some documents that the commission has asked for and obtained from Transnet. So there may be others that you may have wanted and you didn't get, or you did get. So, but I just thought I must just let you know that I am aware that the commission will be in communication with Mr. Mkwanazi in regard to some of the Transnet issues. And I'm happy that his commitment to cooperate with the commission and to assist the commission has been reiterated by you as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I may then hand over to my learned friend, Ms. Armstrong.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I must just say that we will have an oath of affirmation administered to Mr. Mkwanazi, even though at some stage in the future he will take an oath in person here, but we will do one today as well. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think then if we can have Mr. Mkwanazi, the witness, appearing now on the screen. Where is the person who is controlling who oh, okay. So it might not be as quick as one thinks.
Mr. Mkwanazi, can you?
Yes.
Could you just, thank you, that's all.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that fine?
Yes, if you can rise, and then either an oath or affirmation will be administered. I think you can just listen.
Please state your full names for the record.
Mafika Edmund Mkwanazi.
Do you have any objection in taking the prescribed affirmation?
I do not have any objection.
Do you solemnly affirm that the evidence will give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, I truly affirm.
I truly affirm.
Thank you very much. You may be seated.
Okay.
Thank you,
Yes,
Chair.
Ms. Armstrong,
Thank you, Chair.
you want to properly place yourself on record
Yes, thank you,
for the
Chair.
first time?
Indeed.
Okay.
Chair, so I'm Amy Armstrong. I'm part of the legal team of the Commission. And before we get started, given the nature of the medium, so is there a means to pin Mr. Mkwanazi? There we go. I'd just like to confirm 3 things with Mr. Mkwanazi about where he is, given that we're using this medium. The first thing I wanted to confirm is, indeed, as we heard from his legal representative, can you confirm, Mr. Mkwanazi, that you are by yourself in the room?
Yes, it's only myself,
Okay.
nobody else.
And can you confirm that you will not be receiving any messages during your testimony? And if you do receive messages, to please bring it to the attention of the chair?
No, I will not be receiving messages naturally, except for the documents that you forwarded to me.
Indeed, and that's the third thing I'd like you to confirm, is just that you will only be looking at the documents and exhibits that have been provided to you and no other documentation. Can you confirm?
That is correct.
Thank
Yes.
you very much, Mr. Mkwanazi. So just to orientate Chair, you and Mr. Mkwanazi about the exhibits and files we'll be using. So the first and the main will be Mr. Mkwanazi's statement and other documents in MM7. Then we will be turning to 2 other files, only 2 other files, one being Exhibit MM3, which was Mr. Pamensky's evidence, and the other one will be MM6, which was Mr. Tsotsi's evidence before the Commission. And Mr. Mkwanazi, you have all 3 of those files with you. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. As my learned friend Ms. Hofmeyer indicated, I have created a list of the different documents in the order that they appear in this file, and I've given them labels. And I will not necessarily be referring to them in the order in which they appear in here, but as I go to them, I will read what the label is into the record as to what the exhibit is called.
Yes, we have already done Mr. Mkwanazi's statement, but for any other documents, as and when you have to refer to them, you will have to deal with them at that stage.
Thank you, Chair. So we've called the first one MM7. Could I correct that just to just call it MM7A, the statement on page 1 and 2?
Well, we said MM7. Is that because you intend to make the others MM7B and onwards?
Indeed, Chair.
Okay, we will then amend what I said earlier on. Mr. Mkwanazi's statement will be Exhibit MM7A. Okay.
Thank you, Chair Medetted. So before we begin, Mr. Mkwanazi, could you just explain what your qualifications are?
I have 2 university degrees, one from the University of Zululand, which is a BSc in mathematics and applied mathematics. And the second one is a degree from the University of Natal in electrical engineering. Then I do have a couple of diplomas from VETS, from White University, etc. But those are short duration diplomas.
Well, on a lighter note, I don't know about you, Ms. Armstrong, but I went to the same 2 universities too.
Oh, goodness. Yes, that is interesting, Jay. So then, Mr. Mkwanazi, if you could explain, you're obviously, as was stated earlier, you're going to be giving testimony in your capacity, your involvement in both Transnet and Eskom. But let's just begin with Transnet. Could you just explain your role at Transnet?
Advocate Amy, I've been with Transnet maybe 19 or 20 years. Because I started there in 1996 as an executive director. Then I left in 2003 being a group CEO. Then I rejoined Transnet in December 2010, and I left in December 2014. So I've had different types of roles. The latest one being that of being non-executive chairman from 2010 to 2014.
Thank you, Mr. Nkwanazi. So can I just take you in this MM7 bundle? I'd like to take you to page 27.
That would be MM027.
That's correct, Mr. Nkwanazi.
Okay. I've got a computer in front of me scrolling down. Let me see, I'm on page 25, 27. Yes, I am there.
Thank you, Mr. Nkwanazi. The purpose of this is just to indicate, Chair, this has been labeled in my file, which we will ensure is in all the files. This is Exhibit MM7D.
Is this letter an exhibit on its own? Or
Indeed.
Is it an attachment?
It's an exhibit on its own.
So you would like it to be admitted as exhibit MM7D?
7D, that's correct.
Is it dated 16
December 2010, indeed.
The letter on Transnet letterhead appearing at page 27. Is it a letter or just a note or
It's an announcement by Transnet.
It's a statement.
Yes.
Yeah, the statement on Transnet letterheads appearing at page 27 will be admitted as exhibit MM7D. Is that right?
It's MM7D.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine.
Thank you. And Mr. Nkwanazi, the purpose of showing that to you is just as a reminder that this is an announcement from Transnet in 16 December 2016, saying that a new chairman was to, and that would be you, Mr. Nkwanazi, is to assume executive responsibilities until a permanent CEO is appointed. And then it states in the first paragraph, you'll be tasked with that additional responsibility of Group Chief Executive with effect from 16 December 2010. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, and
I'm sorry, just to connect this with something else. Would it be correct, Mr. Nkwanazi, to say when you became a non-executive director, chairman of the board in 2010, you were coming in together with a new board of Transnet?
That is correct, Chair.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
so just to confirm, Mr. Nkwanazi, you're a non-executive chairman of the board from December 2010 to 2014, but you have a brief period from December 2010 as being an executive, acting executive of the group chief executive. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then
I'm sorry, the proper title would have been acting chief executive or
Acting group chief executive.
Acting Group Chief Executive, thank you, I'm indebted. And then in 16 February 2011, I believe that Mr. Brian Molefe was appointed. Does that accord with your memory as the Group Chief?
It's plus minus that time, yes.
Okay, so it's just in that period from December to February 2011 that you were serving as the Group Chief Executive.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And then, Mr. Nkwanazi, just your role at ESCOM.
Yes.
What was that?
I was non-executive director. I had been there before, by the way, in the late 90s. I was on the board of the ESCOM Council then. They were called ESCOM Council. It could have been 1995 or 1996. It was for a brief period, maybe 2 years. Then in 2011, June, 2011, around June, the minister appointed me to the board of ESCOM as a non-executive director.
And do you recall the end of your tenure on the board, the date?
I think it was December 2014.
That's my understanding. Thank you, Mr. Mkhwanazi. So let's begin then with your evidence regarding Transnet, and that is, let's go back to your statement, which is page 1 of that bundle that you're looking at.
Yes.
That is MM7A exhibit. And then, Mr. Mkhwanazi, can you just turn to the second page where your signature appears?
Yes.
Can you just confirm that that is your signature?
Yes, it is my signature.
Okay. And then, Mr. Mkhwanazi, I see at the top of the beginning of the statement, your surname is spelled incorrectly. It's got an H in it, just the very first page, Mkhwanazi. So I take it that's incorrect.
Yes.
You must just correct
No,
that.
no, that's incorrect. There's no H.
Great. And then besides...
But I'm sorry, just out of curiosity, is the position that whether it's written with an H or without an H is the same people? So
It's the same family, Chair. You are spot on, because in my family, there are 4 children. 2 of the children have an H, 2 of the children do not have an H. It was the Home Affairs that decided what.
I was about to ask whether it was a Home Affairs error. Okay, all right.
Thank you, Mr. Mkhwanazi. So besides that correction, do you have any other corrections at the outset you'd like to make to this statement?
No.
Okay. So then do you confirm that under oath that the statement is true and correct?
It is, yes.
Thank you. Okay, so as my learned friend, Ms. Hoffmeyer, explained, basically any meeting with a member of the Gupta family is of great interest to the Commission, and we'd like to just expand upon the content of the statement and make sure that we understand in detail everything that happened on each of the 2 meetings that you deal with in this statement. So I'm going to be taking you through those events step by step. And of course, Mr. Mkhwanazi, I know this was a long time ago. The statement starts in January 2011, but just if you could give us as much detail as you can recall, we would appreciate that. So,
yes.
Well, maybe let us say, Mr. Mkhwanazi, did you ever meet with the Guptas?
Yes, I have, Chairman.
Yeah. Do you remember how many times you met with them?
Yeah.
How many times?
I have, Chairman. I met them twice around that time when we're talking, me going to their house. Then when we say Guptas, it's an interesting family. Yes, I met them that time. But then I met them at some of their events, if I can call them.
Yes.
Like at the TNA breakfasts.
Yes.
I met their employees,
yes.
Not necessarily the Gupta family.
Yes. Okay, let's talk about the times when you met them in their house, in their residence.
Yes.
Tell us about the first visit to their house, if you visited their house. Tell us how that came about, and give me as much information about what you discussed with them as possible.
Yes. I got a call in January 2011 from a Mr. Tony Gupta, who indicated to me that he had got my detailed cell phone number from Minister Kikaba and requested to see me. I agreed to see him, and then they gave me details of where they stayed, and we agreed on a date. I don't recall the date exactly, and I went to visit them at their house somewhere in Saxon World, if I recall. And yes, on arrival at that gate, naturally the security, then I come through the gate, And then I drive through something like a drive-through where I then stopped the car, told to stop the car in front of an entrance. Get out of the car, then walk up the stairs because the protocol there seemingly was you drive your car in, then they drive the car to where they park it. You don't know where exactly they park it. So then I got into the house and there was another protocol. I recall, I think I had to take off my shoes and then went to this venue where this meeting was going to be held. And in that room, I then got introduced to the people I was going to meet. One of them was Tony Gupta, and the other was Tutuzane Zuma. Upon meeting them, we had what I would call general discussions or pleasantries. They introduced themselves, told me that they were involved in mining, computers. They employed well over 10,000 people in the country in terms of whatever they were doing. And of course, I had to reciprocate. I told them that, no, I'm an entrepreneur. And at that time, I was working on a project to try and do something in KZN, which was an ambitious project of property development. And therefore, we shared that. And then we came to the main purpose of the discussion, which was they made me aware that they are friends of President Zuma, which is fine. And then they made me aware that they are aware that Transnet has a marketing budget of 1 billion. I'm not sure where they got that from. And they therefore wanted to be allocated 30 to 50% of that marketing budget. And of course, I told them that Transnet has got a method of procuring anything through a procurement manual. They issue RFIs, RFQs, and RFPs, requests for proposals, etc., before they take decisions on things like those as a matter of principle. But also, me as an individual, even though I was seeing them at that time, you need to understand I might have been acting GCE, but I didn't behave like an acting GCE. I behaved like a non-executive chairman. So I made them aware that, hold it, you're actually talking to the wrong person because I'm non-executive chairman. People who get involved in procurement matters are executives. And in that case, whatever their levels are, but it's executives in the various areas of the organization. And of course, they then went about telling me how close they are to the president. They meet him once a week. He comes to their social functions. And yes, also as it comes to their social functions, you could see that these people are deep friends with the president. They even shared that at virtually a week, he visits their house, et cetera, and therefore, in terms of the entertaining that they do, they even claim that occasionally the president sings for them, Shinuam, Shinuam. Naturally, whatever they were saying, didn't go down well with me. I felt they were abusing their friendship with the president. And but I did ask Tutuzane to confirm if these people are actually friends of your father, and he did confirm. And that, in a nutshell, would be how we met. But it didn't. The meeting didn't end on a good note because they were too boisterous, as if they control a lot of things that I knew they were lying about. Yeah. So yes, that was my first meeting with them on that first occasion. Then post that meeting,
maybe
because let me pause.
Okay, yeah. Maybe let's deal with that first meeting and finish before we move to the next meeting. Ms. Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. So just a few details. I'd like to just orientate us in time. So this is January 2011, which means you've just been appointed as non-executive chair. You're acting group chief executive. And so this is just after that. And you arrive at, first of all, you get a phone call. I just wanted to confirm, do you recall exactly what Mr. Tony Gupta said to you in that call?
Yeah, he confirmed that you are Mr. Mkwanazi, etc., etc. I said, yeah. And he said, we've been given your number by Mr. Minister Kikaba, and we would like to meet you. Then I said, okay, fine, I can meet you. It's not a big issue. Yeah.
Had you heard of Mr. Gupta before this phone call?
Yes, I had read about them in terms of some of their involvement with some of the black business people in the country around that time. Yes, I had read about them.
So why did you...
But I didn't know which one in terms of... It was just like the Gupta family who deal with various people at the time, some big names in the PE space, if I can use the word.
Thank you. And why did you agree to attend this meeting? I mean, so they're summoning you to their home, and was that normal? Why did you feel that you should attend that meeting?
Don't forget, I felt I should attend this meeting because you can't quote my minister and I don't respond in a particular way. So yes, I felt I should attend that meeting because somehow I already knew that these are important people. I had read about some of the investments that they had done in the country. So yes, I felt I had to meet them.
Before you proceed, Ms. Armstrong, you said that Mr. Gupta, Tony Gupta, said he got your cell phone number.
My details.
From your details from Minister Kikaba, is that right?
That is correct.
Is it true that at that time Minister Kikaba was Minister of Public Enterprises?
That is correct, Chair.
Under which Transnet fell? Public Enterprises.
Yes, yes.
Transnet fell under Public Enterprises Department, is that right?
That is correct, Chairman.
Yes. Now, had you given Minister Kikaba your cell phone number before?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I had.
You had given.
Because I had met Mr. Kikaba around October of that year. I had known Mr. Kikaba while he was in the ANC Youth League.
Yes.
So, yes.
You had given him your number.
He's got my numbers. He had had my numbers for years.
Yes. Okay, all right. And you were speaking to Mr. Tony Gupta, as far as you know, for the first time when he called you on this occasion? Or you had had some interactions with him?
No, I had never spoken to him before.
Before. Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Ms.
Chair.
Armstrong?
And I just want to talk a bit about what the house in Saxonwold looked like to you. So from the outside, when you approached it, do you have any memory of what it looked like to you?
All I recall, I think it was a white painted house or light gray. It had big gates with very high pillars on both sides, and I think it had a guardhouse as well, somewhere in there. And naturally, I only saw a portion of the house, maybe 5% of the house. I didn't see the rest of it because all I saw was how to get in, drive to the entrance. That's basically it, in the house and then into the meeting room.
Thank you. And Mr. Mkwanazi, when you got out the car and you handed over your keys to the valet, were there any other security protocols that took place?
Not too many, but all I can indicate, it looked like a highly guarded home, because even as you entered, there was maybe two security at the gate, two security personnel. And of course, you entered. But what was interesting about, just a strange observation, I don't think I saw a black security guard, and I don't think I saw a black worker inside who gave tea or things like those. So yes, that's how I remember the house. And then I went inside and went into that boardroom where we're offered Coca-Cola to drink, etc. Yeah, but that's it.
Thank you. And Mr. Mkhwanazi, did you keep your cell phone on you at all times?
My cell phone was on me at all times. They didn't demand it or something like that, yeah.
Thank you. And when you walked into the meeting room, so could you just explain, you get to the entrance of the house, and then how does it look when you walk in the door?
That was how many years ago? 10 or 11, I'm not sure now.
About 10 years
Frankly.
Indeed.
Yeah.
You're asking me a difficult question.
No,
The
indeed.
next thing you'll ask me was the portrait, what was the color of the wall, how many corners were there when you turn right or turn left. I
Okay.
do not recall.
Indeed, Mr.
Let's ask
Mkhwanazi.
you another question. At this meeting, apart from Mr. Tony Gupta and Mr. Duduzane Zuma and yourself, was there anybody else?
No, there was nobody. It was just the three of us.
Yes. Okay, all right. You have already told me up to a certain point that you exchanged pleasantries or
Yeah.
had a general discussion, but then Mr. Tony Gupta then raised the issue of, or said that they were aware of Transnet's marketing budget, is that correct?
That's correct.
Of 1 billion rand. That's what they said, is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Was it factually correct that that was the marketing budget of Transnet at the time?
Chairman, I didn't know then, but that was so incorrect and false. Why I would know, because at some stage I was on the South African Airways board, and the entity within Transnet at the time that spent a lot of money on marketing was actually SAA. And in 2010 or 11, SAA was out of Transnet by that time. So this figure of 1 billion was a thumbsuck.
Oh, that's quite interesting because with regard to GCIS, I had evidence last year, I think it was, or it might have been towards the end of 2018, that from Mr. Themba Masego, who was Chief Executive Officer of GCIS at a certain stage, that when he met with Ajay Gupta at Saxon World in 2010, Ajay Gupta told him exactly the correct amount budget that his department, namely GCIS, had. And he was surprised at that. But I think you are saying that certainly what Tony Gupta said was not the correct budget for Transnet.
Chairman, it would not have been, even though at that time I had not even checked what amount the budget was, but my knowledge of that entity was deep enough to know that this figure of 1 billion is just a thumbsuck.
Okay, yes. Now...
Sorry, Chair, just on that issue,
yes.
may I just direct Mr. Mkhwanazi to an affidavit that we've procured at page 37 of the bundle, and that is from Mr. Libuwani Mahode from Transnet.
I'm sorry, page 37.
34?
34.
That's correct, 34.
Is that
MM 34.
MM 34 of that same bundle?
You will find that most of the time, Mr. Mkhwanazi, we won't mention MM, we'll just say 34. but we will be meaning MM34.
Oh.
Yes.
I'm on that page, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. And Chair, this is an affidavit that doesn't seem to be contentious, but we seek it to be provisionally admitted.
Yes, this would be exhibit,
This is exhibit MM7E.
the affidavit of Luvuwani Tomi Makode. Livuwani is Livuwani, Tomi Makode, Makhode, which appears at page 34, will be admitted and marked as exhibit
MM7E.
E. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
And Mr. Mkwanazi, if you turn to the next page, the budgets are set out there for Transnet's marketing and advertising. And you'll see that in 2010, the total marketing budget was 27,005,399. And in 2011, the total spend marketing budget was 95,530,394. So you were correct to be skeptical about those figures. They're off by a factor of at least 10 in 2011 and by more than that for 2010.
Yes.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yes. Ms. Armstrong,
Thank you, Chair.
on that first meeting, do you still have questions?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mkwanazi, I just want to ask if when you entered the room and Mr. Duduzane, Zuma, and Mr. Gupta were there, did they introduce themselves, and did you know who they were before you entered that room? For Mr. Zuma in particular, as you indicated, you hadn't heard from Mr. Gupta before? So,
Duduzane, I knew the name, but we had never met.
okay, thank you.
So yes, I met him. And Tony Gupta, I had heard the names. Even right now, there are two of them. I'm not sure what their names are, but one is light complexion. The other one is a little bit darker. So yes, I met Tony Gupta then. And that's it.
Thank you.
And of course, I did meet Duduzane again at a different at the second meeting.
Thank you. And did they, when Mr. Gupta was speaking about his relationship to President Zuma, did he mention any other relationship to members of parliament or cabinet? Anything else about his influence?
They did try to indicate that they are friends with cabinet ministers and members of parliament, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, but in my view, they were like trying to portray a figure of, we are these important people that were friends with your cabinet ministers. It didn't intimidate me or anything. Even when they said they're friends with the president, I was not at all intimidated.
And when you mentioned your business, the development in KZN, did they indicate that they were interested at all in investing in that business?
Sort of, they said they would like to look into it, but not that they will invest. Yeah, they said they would like to know more about it, but that whole thing did not get off the ground, whatever I was trying to do in KZN.
And when they asked you about the marketing budget of Transnet, and they asked to have, I think you said 30 to 50% allocated to the New Age newspaper.
To them, yeah.
What was the tone of this? Was this a request, something they expected? How did you interpret it?
Don't forget, in my interpretation of their approach, they had no clue about how business works, zero clue. They behaved as if a Transnet is like a spaza shop who, when somebody comes and say, give me 30% of this, you just give. So they had no clue about business protocols, how to run businesses. So which is why then, even when they came with that figure of 1 billion, they asked for this 30 to 50%. I could see that for some reason, these people have never been in business, and now I must educate them that this is how an organization like Transnet procures for services, whatever services they are. And of course, I did indicate to them that Transnet procures in a particular way following a procurement manual.
And did you suggest during the course of the meeting or at the end that you wanted to have a second meeting?
Yes, I did, because from where I sat, I felt that the loop is not properly closed. I personally wanted that somebody from within the department be present to hear what I call these dreamers talking about a R1 billion marketing budget and asking for 30 to 50% of that. So I did say I would like to have a second meeting with you guys.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nkwananzi. So after that meeting, so you want...
Before
Yes,
we
Chair.
move on to the next meeting, did you say that they said that Mr. Zuma, who was president at the time, used to visit their house once a week?
Almost weekly, yes.
Almost weekly. That's what they
Yeah.
said.
They said that, yes.
Yes. Now, in terms of the discussion there, you have been using they. I think most of the time.
It's the one guy.
Was it both of them? Was it both of them speaking, namely Tony?
No. Tutuzane never uttered a word.
He never uttered a word.
Never uttered a word.
Well, it was Tony Gupta who was talking.
Tony Gupta was talking. At some stage, I had to ask Tutuzane, are these people telling the truth about their relationship with your father? That's the only time he opened his mouth, and he confirmed it, that they're friends with the president.
Yes. Well, that's interesting that you say that, because I have had I've had evidence from quite a few people who said they had been to meetings with Mr. Tony Gupta and Mr. Tutuzane Zuma at the Gupta residence, and most, if not all of whom, have said during the discussions that they had at such meetings, Mr. Tutuzane Zuma was silent and didn't say much. One of such witnesses was Mr. Jonas, who said he had a meeting with Tutuzane Zuma. And of course, in his case, there was also Mr. Hlongwane, and on his version, that is Mr. Jonas' version, there was also a Gupta brother there. He could not say which one, but it would appear that if there was well, actually, I think Mr. Tutuzane Zuma and Mr. Hlongwane said that on the occasion when they met with Mr. Jonas, Tony Gupta was the only Gupta brother who was around. So Mr. Jonas said during his meeting with them there, Mr. Tutuzane Zuma didn't say much. Mr. Tukwana, a former MEC from the Free State, also gave evidence of a meeting which he said he had at the Gupta residence with Mr. Tony Gupta and Mr. Tutuzane Zuma. He too said Mr. Tutuzane Zuma didn't say much in that meeting. I think there is another third person, maybe even fourth, who have given evidence along the same lines also, that at these meetings, Mr. Tutuzane Zuma would be very quiet and Mr. Tony Gupta would be the one doing the talking. So you are giving evidence to the same effect about Mr. Duduzane Zuma. Is that right?
That is correct, Chair. He was abnormally silent.
Yes. Now, one of the things that you have said, and you must just confirm in case I didn't understand, did you say that they, and I assume now I must say Mr. Tony Gupta, because you say Mr.
That's
Duduzane
correct.
Zuma was quiet most of the time. Did you say Mr. Tony Gupta said that sometimes when Mr. Zuma would be in their house, they would ask him to sing Umshini Wami for them? Is that what you say he said?
Yes, I said so, that when I say in their house, at their functions, I don't know what functions
Oh, at their
are
functions,
these.
yeah, yes.
It's like maybe they entertain a lot, they call people to a hall or gatherings. Yes, he did.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
We can move then to the second meeting. Tell me about the second meeting that you had with them.
Thank you, Chair. Naturally, as I indicated, post this meeting, when I got the request then to that second meeting, I did brief advocate, the good advocate Mahlangu, that Hlangu, look, I've had a first meeting with Tony, and I want you to be present because I want to have a witness.
Just tell us who Advocate Mahlangu was.
He was the advisor to Minister Kikaba.
Okay, all right. And before you proceed, just tell me once again how the second meeting came about. I seemed to hear earlier on that you were saying you asked for the another meeting. So just tell me how it came about.
The first meeting didn't go very well because somehow I got angry when, in my interpretation, they were beginning to denigrate my president. So I got very agitated. So the first meeting didn't go very well. Then they suggested that we meet again, and I agreed because in my mind then I knew that I wanted to bring a witness to see these types of business people. So I did brief Advocate Mahlangu that there's a meeting I want you to come to be a witness at, so that you see how some people behave under the guise of being sent by or having got my phone numbers from Minister Kikaba. So yes, he agreed to join me at that particular date.
Sorry, Mr. Mkonazi, you say in your statement, I was contacted for a second meeting. So did somebody call you just to?
Yes, they did. They did, and I said, I'm coming, and I'm going to bring a witness with.
And who was that called you?
Tony Gupta.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So you took the minister's special advisor with you. Why didn't
That's correct, yeah.
Yes. Why didn't you speak to former Minister Kikaba about this directly?
You know, maybe I'm a strange individual. I don't elevate what I can call nonsensical stories to the minister. To me, these people were talking nonsensical stories, which is why I just needed somebody. It could have been another person, as long as maybe that somebody was at Public Enterprises. If in case it's true that the minister gave these people my number. So that's why then I asked Advocate Mahlangu to accompany me.
And then at the second meeting, did you drive together with Mr. Mahlangu?
No, we didn't drive together. I used my car and most probably used this as well, because we wouldn't have come from the same direction.
So did he
understand the logistics.
Thank you. Did he join you at the beginning of the meeting?
I'm not sure if I found him there or if he found me there, but we were both at that meeting at round about that time that was set for the meeting. And then we, yeah.
Was that attended again by the same people or different people?
No, Tony Gupta and Duduzane Zuma.
Thank you. And so what was the content of this meeting? What did you discuss?
No, it's a follow-up, and I explained why advocate was there, so that in front of an official of the department who works for the minister, I'm explaining to you guys as whatever the company, TNA or Sahara, or whatever they're called, that this is how Transnet procures. They did repeat their request that they are requesting this 30 to 50% of the marketing.
And thank you, Chair. Mr. Mkhonazi, what was your response again to the request?
No, same response that hold it. Now it's four of us. It's myself, it's Advocate Mashang, Tutuzane, and Tony. That this is how. Of course, I didn't know the marketing budget of Transnet then, or even in the first meeting. I didn't know it because I'm only at Transnet maybe 2 months. Then I've got to know all these budgets, et cetera, et cetera. It's near impractical. So I still made them aware that, frankly, I don't know how big that budget is. Also, the process is you follow an RFP, RFI, or an RFQ through executives in the company, not through a non-executive chairman.
And what is their reaction to this? What was Mr. Gupta's reaction to this?
They accepted my explanation.
In the first meeting, how did Mr. Tony Gupta take your response to their request?
I don't think they took it well in the first meeting. That's why then a suggestion was we need to meet again. But even myself, the approach, I didn't take it well because they were waving the flag of being friends of the president rather than talking what they want to talk. And I was terribly annoyed, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. And then after this meeting, did you again speak to the minister about what had happened at this meeting?
No, I did not. As I indicate, I'm not a person who speaks to the minister every week or every month. I do not do that. I usually have an agenda and a meeting schedule if I need to speak to the minister.
So the outcome of the second meeting was simply that, at least to you, it appeared that they accepted namely Tony Gupta and Mr. Duduzane Zuma, they accepted that you could not be of assistance to them?
Yes, that is sort of, but at least I achieved something as well in terms of the fact that I now brought somebody who is close to government, who has explained to these gentlemen that that is not how state-owned entities operate.
Did Mr. Siyabonga Mahlangu, it was Siyabonga Mahlangu, yes.
Yes,
Did he confirm to them that how Transnet procures goods or services was exactly the way you had stated?
Chairman, I don't think he would have confirmed anything because I doubt if he would have known himself too.
Oh,
in terms of how things are done, because he's an outsider.
Yes, okay. But he was there, he observed, he witnessed what was discussed.
He did observe, yes.
He didn't say much himself, and the meeting ended.
Yeah, yes, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Mkwanazi, did you note any change in your relationship with Minister Kikaba after this meeting?
No, there was no change because the things that we do, there are certain meetings that we hold, almost like quarterly meetings with him or once in 6 months meetings with him under certain conditions. Those meetings went ahead. I didn't see any change whatsoever in him.
Did you say earlier on, before you became non-executive chairman of the Transnet board, you had known Minister Kikaba for quite some time and you had known him quite well?
Yes.
And you knew him quite well, reasonably well?
Maybe not quite well, Chair, but I knew him.
But you knew him, yeah, okay.
Thank you, Chair. And just before I move to another page, Mr. Mkwanazi, that second meeting, how long after the first meeting was it?
Maybe 2 weeks.
Thank you. Then, Mr. Mkwanazi, I just want to direct you to a news article that's at page MM37.
Okay.
Chair, this MM37, I would like to label exhibit MM7F.
It's not just labeling.
I'd like to enter it into the record.
You ask that it be admitted,
as exhibit
MM7.
MM7F. Thank you, Chair.
Exhibit M7. What's the letter?
F, Chair.
F for
F.
full.
That's indeed.
Okay. Okay. The Business Day article at page 37 will be admitted as exhibit MM7F.
Indeed, Chair. Thank you. So, Mr. Mkwanazi, this is dated the 9th of June, 2011, in the Business Day. And the headline is, and it's written by Peter Bruce, the headline is Chairman of Transnet, Eskom and Denel to go. Are you familiar with this article?
Yes, I am.
Did you read it when it came out in the Business Day?
To read it is an understatement. It was a shocker.
Okay.
Well, before we proceed, Ms. Armstrong, I can't read a word.
Okay. Well, Chair.
On this page.
Okay. I think, Chair, then we'll have this replaced, I think, in the record, but I can read out the relevant portions on the record, if that would be helpful.
That's fine, do that, but see if it's possible later on to
be
get
replaced.
a clearly legible article and replace it with it.
Indeed,
yeah.
we will do that, Chair.
Okay. So I'll rely on you to tell me what the relevant part says.
Thank you, Chair. So, Mr. Mkwanazi, it starts by saying the chairman of 3 of South Africa's most...
I'm sorry, before you do that, just identify the articles, what date, business day, what date, and so on.
So that is the 9th of June 2011 in Business Day.
Okay, all right. Continue.
And thank you, Chair. And it states in the first paragraph, the chairman of three of South Africa's most powerful state-owned companies, Transnet, Eskom, and Denel, are to be removed soon in a dramatic show of force by Public Enterprises Minister Minister Kikaba. Then it says the changes were approved at a cabinet meeting in Cape Town yesterday. That would be on the 8th of June, 2011. Business Day understands that Transnet Chairman Mafika Mkhwanazi will be invited to move to the board of Eskom as an ordinary member. And then I'm just skipping to the last paragraph in the article on that page because the rest is about the other SOEs. We turn to the next page, MM37.1, where the article is finalized. It's just the end of it, and it reads, "It is understood, nevertheless, that Mr. Kikaba did not have it all his own way at the cabinet meeting yesterday. His proposal to replace Mr. Mkhwanazi at Transnet with Iqbal Rafiq Sharma was shut down, and a new candidate will have to be found." Do you recall this article, this conclusion and your reaction to this when you read this?
Yes, I do recall that article and the conclusion, and also my understanding was that somehow some of the cabinet members were not privy to that plan, and they only read about it on the day of that meeting, whatever cabinet meeting it was. So they felt that it should have been discussed in more detail, some cabinet ministers.
Indeed, because Mr. Mkhwanazi, how I understand this is, what I understand the article to be saying is that Mr. Kikaba recommended your removal as chair of the board at Transnet and that you be replaced with Mr. Sharma. But while he was successful in the cabinet meeting at removing you, he was not successful in replacing you with Mr. Sharma. Is that also how you understand this article?
Hold it. I'm not sure if he was successful at removing me, because I was not removed at Transnet.
No, indeed. I'm saying what the article says, not what in fact happened. So if I just remind you.
Ms. Armstrong, did you mean successful in getting the approval of cabinet?
Indeed,
Okay,
Chair.
so you want to repeat your question and formulate it with regard to that?
So, Mr. Mkhwanazi, my understanding of this article, not what happened in reality, but my understanding of what the Business Day is saying, is that Mr. Kikaba attempted to have you removed and recommended this to cabinet, and that he was successful in having you removed, but not in having you replaced with Mr. Sharma. That's my understanding of this article.
No, we may be at cross purposes. I think Mr. Mkhwanazi is going to still give you the same answer. As I understand what he is saying, he's saying he doesn't think that Mr. Kikaba succeeded in having him removed because he was not removed.
Indeed.
But I thought that what you intended to say is that the article suggests that Mr. Kikaba succeeded in getting cabinet approval that he be removed.
Indeed.
Whether or not he was actually removed is another matter.
Indeed, Chair. So, exactly. And I'm just pointing out, Mr. Mkhwanazi, that you would have read this
I read it.
and would have had quite a reaction because, as you point out, in reality, you were not removed. The cabinet did not approve that recommendation. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
Maybe let's just tell me what you understood the article to be saying and what your reaction was.
Chair, I understood what the article was saying, particularly the headline, Chairman of Transnet, Eskom and Denel to go. And naturally, why somehow it was a big shock. This had never been discussed with me, that I would leave Transnet. But other things in various meetings with the minister and other key ministers, we had discussed in my presence the question of SOC board chairman sitting in various state-owned entity boards for certain collaborations by state-owned entities. So I was not surprised that I was going to be proposed to go to ESCO. But what surprised me was that then I was going to be fired from Transnet, and yet at a strategic discussion that we would have had a few months before, we did discuss these issues of chairman of SOC boards, so that you said you get certain collaborations going between certain types of SOCs. Yes.
So prior to this article appearing, there had been discussions in which you had participated, where the idea that chairpersons of the boards of various SOEs could have a forum where they could discuss matters of mutual interest. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chair. We did have a forum like that, and the two key ministers who used to attend was Minister Kikaba and Minister Patel, and occasionally two other cabinet ministers.
Yes, and these discussions that you are talking about, where this issue was discussed, did Minister Kikaba attend some of those?
He was the chairman of those meetings, Chairman.
Of those meetings, yes. So, but what was new to you when you read this article was that you were going to be removed as chairperson of Transnet board.
That was new, Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. And so, Mr. Mkhwanazi, let me take you to the cabinet recommendation, the memo that was sent to cabinet by Mr. Kikaba, and that you will find the following page, which is page MM38.
Okay.
You want that to be admitted?
Indeed, Chair, as MM7G.
MM38, I've got that.
Thank you so much.
The letter or the memorandum dated 25 May 2011 on the letterheads of the Ministry of Public Enterprises, appearing at page 38. Will be admitted. It's written Cabinet Memorandum number 4 of 2011 will be admitted as Exhibit MM7G.
Thank you, Chair. So, Mr. Mkhwanazi, paragraph 2.2 indeed does say, further, for Cabinet to concur with the appointment of Mr. Iqbal Sharma as chairperson and non-executive director of the Transnet board. So that was the recommendation regarding the chair position of Transnet. And then at paragraph 3.2, which is on the following page, page MM39. In addition, it is recommended that 2 non-executive directors of the Transnet board not be reappointed at the annual general meeting of Transnet to be held on the 24th of June. And in their place, 2 nominees are recommended to be considered for appointment to Transnet as non-executive directors. Furthermore, it is recommended that Mr. Iqbal Sharma, a current member of the Transnet board, be appointed as the chairperson, non-executive director of the Transnet board, to replace Mr. Mafika Mkhwanazi, the current chairperson. So, Mr. Mkhwanazi, this was indeed the proposal before Cabinet. And Mr. Mkhwanazi, do you know what transpired at that meeting, what the outcome was?
I've got no idea.
Which meeting now?
This Cabinet meeting to deliberate on these recommendations.
I've got no idea.
And the outcome, Mr. Mkhwanazi? For you, the outcome of the meeting.
Outcome?
Yes.
No, the outcome, I was not replaced.
Okay. So,
did Mr. Kikaba and you speak about this article after it had appeared in the Business Day?
Chairman, we did talk about the article after it appeared. And his response was somebody had leaked something which was work in progress, and therefore it was leaked in a wrong way. We did discuss it.
Did you ask him whether it was true that he sought cabinet approval for your removal from as chairperson of the board of Transnet? Or maybe you didn't put it like that, but in effect, did you ask him to confirm whether that is true?
Chairman, I did not ask him as straightforward as you say,
yes.
But his response was there was work in progress within his department and it was leaked to the press.
Did that response suggest that he was saying he had not as yet asked the cabinet to approve your removal from Transnet? I just want to make sure I understand clearly what he told you or what your understanding was of what he told you.
Chairman, what he told me is different to what had been submitted to cabinet.
Yes.
But I'm not privy to the cabinet debate
of course,
around
yes.
Why Mr. Iqbal Sharma should become chairman.
Yes, yes. But based on what he told you, was your understanding that he was saying he had not as yet asked cabinet to approve your removal from, or is that something?
No, Chairman. No, Chair, because he had done it. It's just that he didn't get the approval of that resolution at cabinet level. He had already done it, as I see in terms of his CAB memo.
Yes. No, I understand that. And when you answer these questions, feel free to reflect properly because it's many years ago, so that when you answer, you are comfortable with your answer. So leaving out what we know because we are looking at these documents now, but bearing in mind what the article in the Business Day had said, when you spoke to him, he did not say anything to suggest he had not made the approach to cabinet that the business article suggested in terms of what he told you and how you understood what he said.
Well, after this article had appeared, naturally, I'm not privy to, it's the first time I see this document. Thank you very much, this CAB memo.
Oh, okay.
I've never seen it. So post the article, because also other board members were now asking me questions that we've read that you've been fired. So that's why then I had to go to him to try and find out, but Minister, what is this article about? Then he said, no, he didn't sound as if he had already pushed through a CAB memo or something, which then might have been rejected. He said, no, maybe it was like there was work in progress on changing boards inside the public enterprises. And then something got leaked, et cetera, et cetera. But I was aware that there is a process within public enterprises to formulate this strategic view of chairmen of various entities sitting elsewhere to get certain collaboration on various topics, local manufacturing, exporting, training. There were a few key strategic topics that we wanted to try and address by this sharing of board members in that particular forum. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. So just to clarify, Mr. Mkhwanazi, but were you aware in this time, in 2011, that Minister Kikaba had recommended your removal?
I was not aware. It's only when I read this article.
Did you at all attribute the attempt by Minister Kikaba to recommend to have you removed to be related in any way to your meeting with Tony Gupta and Duduzane Zuma?
Not really, but maybe there could be, I don't know.
I see.
When you read the article and when you spoke to Mr. Kikaba, insofar as in your mind, you remained with the idea that he might, or cabinet might, be wishing you to be removed from Transnet. Did you think that the reason might be the forum that had been discussed, or did you think it might be some other reason that you did not know? Did you think about why would they want to remove me? Or not really?
Chair, I do not know, but the forum where these things were discussed, we didn't discuss in that detail, because it was more a high-level strategic forum of discussing these issues. Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So when you were having these discussions with Minister Kikaba, did he indicate at all that that Mr. Mahlangu had relayed anything about your meetings to him?
No, we did not discuss that.
And did you speak to anybody else about the meetings with Mr. Gupta and Mr. Duduzane Zuma?
I would have discussed that with some board member or something like that, but in passing, not in detail.
Then can I take you to another article that is at page...
Maybe before you do this, Ms. Armstrong, as I understand it, this Business Day article was in June 2011, is that right?
That's correct.
So that was...
That's correct.
That means that you had been with the Transnet board only for about 6-7 months, is that right?
That is correct, Chair. Yes.
You had been a member of various boards over a long period in different companies by this time, is that not so?
That is correct, Chair.
And when you have been a member of a board of a company for 6 months, it seems to me that it's quite a short time to be removed.
It is short.
Are you able to comment on that?
Yeah.
It is short.
It is very short, Chairman.
Yes. Yes, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Then let's move to page MM23 of that bundle.
Okay.
So, Chair, again, I ask that this be admitted as an exhibit as MM7C.
You said 23.
That's correct, Mr. Mkhwanazi.
Yes, I've got it, yes.
What is this document? Just identify it.
So
Ms.
this
Armstrong.
document is an article from the Mail and Guardian entitled Going Off the Rails, dated 4 March 2011.
Yeah,
Yes.
the article from the Mail and Guardian appearing at page 23, titled Going Off the Rails, will be admitted and marked as exhibit MM7C.
Thank you,
Okay.
Chair. And Chair, I've just been alerted that a larger and clearer copy of the Business Day article that we looked at has been prepared and will be brought up to be replaced in our files.
Okay, okay. Well, if it's with you right now.
Not yet, Chair.
Oh,
It's
not
being
yet.
prepared now.
Okay, all right.
So, Mr. Mkhwanazi, then just turn, please, to the next page in the article, on page 24, the portion that's highlighted.
Yes.
It says, Mkhwanazi, who drove the appointment process, this is a reference to Mr. Brian Molefe's appointment, admits he has a personal relationship with the Guptas and has met them to discuss private business interests, but denied this influenced Mr. Molefe's appointment. Mr. Mkhwanazi, did you have an opportunity to comment on this article? Did you see it before it was published?
When I say to comment, no, but meaning the fact that they wrote what they wrote,
Indeed.
I must have spoken to them based on the questions that they were asking, yes.
So this description of you having a personal relationship with the Guptas.
Yes.
Well, you want to first, Ms. Armstrong, just read into the record the relevant part and then ask him the highlighted part.
Okay, sorry, Chair. I'll read it again. Mkhwanazi, who drove the appointment process, admits he has a personal relationship with the Guptas and has met them to discuss private business interests, but denied this influenced Molefe's appointment. And so, Mr. Mkhwanazi, you described your relationship to the Mail and Guardian as a personal relationship with the Guptas. Is that correct?
I did describe it like that, but to say is that correct? It's correct that I met them on the day that I met them at their house. But then, you know, the media is a strange animal because I wouldn't like to discuss certain matters of how I run companies through the media, which is why I responded this way.
But just to me, having met briefly on 2 occasions with the Guptas, a personal relationship sounds a bit of an overstatement to me.
It's a strong word, yes, I must say, yes.
But there's no additional relationship you had except for those 2 meetings.
No.
Well, let's deal with this head on. So you admit that you did say to the journalist who wrote the article or whoever may have spoken to you from the Mail and Guardian that you had a personal relationship with the Guptas, is that right?
Yes, I had met them, yes.
Yes. As we speak today, do you stand by that description that you had a personal relationship with the Guptas, or do you not?
Chairman, a personal relationship is too strong a word. For 2 meetings I had, which maybe lasted an hour and a half in total, both of them.
But why did you use that word?
No, at the time I used it because I wanted to dismiss the media off my back. They were on to too many issues, if I can use the word.
But that doesn't sound right, that you would say you have a personal relationship with them to dismiss the media if, in fact, you did not have a personal relationship with them. What do you say to that?
Chairman, you know, the use of the English language when you are a Zulu-speaking person gets a little bit tricky. But yes, I did have 2 meetings with them, and I did say that I had a personal relationship with them.
Yes. Okay, all right. Ms. Armstrong?
The article goes on to say, asked what these business interests were and whether they were disclosed to the board, Transnet said, all our board members are required to disclose their private interests at each and every board meeting. Mr. Mkhwanazi has no existing business interests with the Gupta family. The discussions he's had with them were exploratory and did not result in a partnership. So again, Mr. Mkhwanazi, your testimony was that there was a brief mention in the general discussions in your meeting about your business,
that's correct.
Property development you had in KZN, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Sounds exploratory discussions that didn't result in a partnership. Once again, sounds like a more significant discussion on that topic than what you've mentioned.
Yes, I'm not sure why they have that in you know, as if it's a quotation, but that matter was never ever touched on again of what I was trying to do there in KZN because it never happened. It fell through almost that same week or 2 weeks later.
And so, Mr. Mkhwanazi, you've told the Mail and Guardian journalists that you had these meetings with the Guptas, is that correct?
Yeah,
And that you spoke about private business interests, is that correct?
that's correct.
But you don't seem to have, or did you, mention anything about what Mr. Tony Gupta had asked you about?
No, I did not.
About procurement and the allocation to the new age?
No, I did not.
And why not?
It's not in my nature to start discussing what I can call board issues or company issues with the media. There are many of other issues, by the way, in the past 20 years, 21 years I've been at Transnet that I've never discussed with the media in terms of whatever they might have been.
Did you disclose what had been discussed with the board of Transnet?
What had been discussed?
With Mr. Tony Gupta about the question of dedicating 30 to 50%?
No, I did not discuss that with the board. You need to understand one strange thing about state-owned entities. In a year, when you are like a chairman or group chief executive, you get 100 proposals or calls from people who want to procure something from your organization. It is so common, and it includes everybody. At times, it starts even with the president himself.
So the point you are making is you can't be telling the board about all of these.
Exactly, Chair.
Many occasions when somebody or other has some discussion with you that doesn't end anywhere, that doesn't lead anywhere. Is that the point you are making?
That is correct, Chair. Just another example, at these TNA breakfasts, which I attended 8 to 10, whatever the number is, people would queue to talk to me and ask for business opportunities in Transnet. Of course, as a civil servant, I would stand in a queue, they would come, and I would talk. This one goes, this one goes. It's part of my job.
But Mr. Mkhwanazi, what might perhaps be a bit unusual was that your number in this case was provided to Mr. Tony Gupta by the minister himself.
Yes, it was unusual, yes.
And so that unusual aspect, you didn't mention that to the journalists at Mail and Guardian?
No, I did not.
Or to the Transnet board?
No, I did not.
So even though that was unusual, why did you decide not to include that information in your statements to them?
Include which information?
So even though it was that aspect of the interactions was unusual, that they got your number from Minister Kikaba, why did you?
No, I did not. Yeah.
But
I did not see a need to do that. Yeah.
Why didn't you see a need?
No, I didn't.
She didn't see it.
Especially when people are.
If you want to say.
You can see they're fishing.
If Ms. Armstrong, if you think that there were grounds for him to have seen a need, you can explore those grounds.
I could have, yeah.
But otherwise, if he says he didn't see a need, he didn't see a need.
Indeed, Chair.
But if you say, what about this, what about this, what about this, didn't all of this show you that there was a need that's different, then you can do that. Thank
you, Chair. I think the elements, the unusual element is of the minister giving Mr. Gupta your number is the aspect that I just wanted to probe further, because Mr. Mkhwanazi, your answer was that you didn't feel the need to tell the board or the media about this meeting because you get many requests, they're very usual. And I was just probing that there was, in fact, an unusual aspect of it, which was that the minister had, according to Mr. Gupta, connected you and put you in touch. And that was, I was probing whether that unusual aspect might have prompted you to treat it differently and perhaps alert somebody else. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mkhwanazi. And were you aware of other officials at the time?
I'm sorry.
Thank you, thank you.
Mr. Mkhwanazi, did you ever have occasion to ask Minister Kikaba whether Tony Gupta was correct in saying he got your details from him?
Chairman, we have never discussed that matter.
Yes.
Even
okay.
Today, or
yes.
We've never discussed that.
Yes, okay, thank you.
And did you hear at the time about any other people or officials being approached in this way by members of the Gupta family to have a meeting?
No, I was not aware of any. I only became aware of these approaches once the commission was set up, and Masego and others, and a lot of other people did come to the commission to make inputs. Then, in my mind, it was, this thing was quite common at the time. Yeah, I didn't know.
And did you, before you were approached by the commission to give evidence, did you feel the need to come forward and disclose the meetings that you had?
No.
And why
Don't
not?
forget, maybe let me put it differently. The answer is no, because at some stage, if you recall, the Secretary General of the ruling party did ask people to come to Lutuli House, etc., etc. I felt that these people are not honest. They themselves know what is happening, so I didn't even go there.
Thank you, Mr. Mkhwanazi.
Well, I'm going to ask you to just repeat. I think what you are saying may be important. You're saying the ruling party did invite people to go to the ruling party and disclose what they knew, and you say you felt that you were not going to go there. I just want you to say once again why you felt like that.
Chairman, yes, I was not going to go. If I recall, maybe it's only Temba Maseko who went to see Mr. Kwede Montashe at the time. But I felt that whatever the Gupta family is doing, it's a well-known thing within the ruling party.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Then, Mr. Mkhwanazi, I'm not going to ask you too much about the New Age breakfast. We've already heard extensive evidence about those. But you do say in your statement that you attended a number of these breakfasts. Is that correct, the New Age breakfasts?
That is correct, yes.
And in your statement, you indicate that you don't have any idea of how much was spent in respect of those breakfasts.
That is correct, yes.
But of course, so we've had testimony. So, for example, from Mr. Patlane has explained that from 2012 to 2017, over 122 million rand was spent on the New Age breakfasts. Now, Mr. Mkhwanazi, in light of the fact that you were contacted and asked by Mr. Tony Gupta to dedicate between 30 and 50% of the Transnet advertising budget to the New Age breakfasts, and we know, and you went to a number of those breakfasts, and you saw that they were occurring, and we know they were, so at that time, were you at all concerned that what you'd been asked to do in a way that didn't comply with procurement procedures was now being in effect, that you were attending these breakfasts, that they were happening? Did that not concern you?
No, it did not concern me. You somehow need to understand the procurement systems of state-owned entities, whereby they have various committees to procure things up to a certain amount, and then up to the CEO level. In this case, it would have been Brian Molefe. Brian Molefe had the full authority to procure certain things, so whatever they might be, up to a certain limit, and then above a certain amount or above a certain time frame, then those things needed to be elevated to the board. The fact that, yes, I was now going to these breakfasts, yes, it's true, but the CEO would have then applied his mind, whether is it worth it that using his discretion and his delegated authority.
Oh dear. I think the screen is frozen.
Oh,
okay. Sorry, Mr. Mkhwanazi, the screen is freezing, so we're missing.
Not sure what.
Yes.
Did you pick that up?
Unfortunately not, Mr. Mkhwanazi. We've missed now a portion of what you were saying.
Yes, they are attending to it, and then we'll ask you to repeat what you said, but they are just attending to it. If
So
you-
can I repeat?
Or just repeat?
Yes, thank
yeah,
you.
Repeat, yeah.
Advocate Amy, can you repeat your
The
remark?
question.
Then
Indeed.
I will respond again.
So, Mr. Mkonazi, your testimony was that you were approached and you were asked by Mr. Gupta to dedicate 30 to 50% of the Transnet advertising budget to the new age. You said, this is an inappropriate way of doing things, this is not how we do business. But then, you then attend yourself a number of these breakfasts. So you see that in fact, Transnet is spending budget on the new age. Did this not concern you, given your the approach by Mr. Gupta?
No, I think he said earlier on, his response to the Guptas was, you are talking to a wrong person.
Yes.
You must go to management, executive management. That's what he said.
Indeed.
And therefore, if they went to management and management granted them whatever they wanted, it wouldn't necessarily be inconsistent with what he said.
Indeed.
That's my recollection. Is that what you said?
That's correct, Chair.
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Mkonazi, you were not concerned, if I understand you correctly, because you imagined that you assumed they had gone through those correct
They had
channels.
followed the processes, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mkonazi. Then, Chair, I see that the time is already 5 o'clock.
Yes, we should try and finish because Mr. Mkhonazi has waited for this time for a long time. And I think certainly from my side, I think we can finish. I assume that we shouldn't be more than 30 minutes more, or am I too ambitious?
Unfortunately, Chair, I just need to deal with...
How much time do you think we need?
I think approximately an hour, Chair.
About an hour.
We have to deal with the ESCOM evidence.
Mr. Mkhonazi, from your side, you are happy for us to continue?
Chairman, I'm happy to continue.
Yes,
I can confirm, Chair, just to put it on record, that we are prepared and ready to continue, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then let's continue. I'm hoping it won't take an hour,
Okay.
but let's
certainly do my best, Chair.
continue. Yeah.
Okay, so just to
We may or may not, we may at some stage need a short break. What time did we start? How long have we been?
about 3:15, I believe, we began.
So we're close to 2 hours.
That's correct, Chair.
Maybe it might be the convenient time to take a short break.
Thank you, Chair.
We'll take a short break, Mr. Mkhonazi, and then we are going to resume. 10 minutes should be okay.
Indeed,
We'll
Chair.
take 10 minutes. My watch says it's 5:10, so 5:20, we will resume. We adjourn.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, Ref.
All rise.
Yeah. Kuyasukunywa manje.
Okay, let's continue.
Thank you, Chair. So, Mr. Mkwanazi, I just want to wrap up some feedback.
Let's get him to be settled. Mr. Mkwanas, are you settled? Are you okay?
I'm settled, Chair.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Chair. So, in order to just finalize the Transnet evidence, I just want to put to you the essential points that Mr. Kikaba has raised in his affidavit in response to our Rule 33 notice, and that is in the file MM7 at page 8.
When you say page 8, can you use the MMs? MM8.
MM08.
Okay.
Whenever she says page 8 or page whatever, without mentioning MM, you must know it's still MM.
Yeah, I've got it.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Chair. So there are just three main aspects of what Mr. Kikaba has said in response to your statement that I'd just like to put to you so you have an opportunity to respond, Mr. Mkwanazi.
Yes.
The first thing that, that Mr. Kikaba says is that he did not provide Mr. Tony Gupta with your number. Do you have a comment?
I've got no comment.
I'm sorry, just repeat that, Ms. Armstrong. I didn't hear the question.
Mr. Kikaba says that he never provided Mr. Tony Gupta with Mr. Mkwanazi's cell phone number.
Yes. I guess when you say you have no comment, Mr. Mkwanazi, you mean you actually don't know whether what Tony Gupta told you is true, but what you have told me is you had given Mr. Kikaba.
I say, Chairman, I say no comment because I don't know whether it's true or not true.
Yes, no, that's what I'm saying. That's the reason why you're saying no comment. But what you
That's
have
correct,
said,
Chair.
what you have said is Mr. Kikaba did have your contact details. You had given them to him. Your
Mr. Kikaba.
contact details. Let me repeat that. What you have said to me is that you had given Mr. Kikaba your contact details. Is that
Oh, yes.
yeah,
Many years ago, Chair.
yeah, prior to this call by Tony
Yes.
Gupta. Yeah, okay.
And the second main point that Mr. Kikaba makes is he says that that you never spoke to him about the meetings, which accords with your testimony today, but that he is surprised because if you were not comfortable, you could have spoken to him about the first or second meeting and you chose not to. Do you have any comments to that statement?
No comment still because I'm not the type of person who reports almost minor things to a minister. To me, that was minor.
Okay, it can't be no comment because you do have comment, which you have just made. Is that right? You are providing a reason why you would not have raised the issue with him. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. So what I'm saying is, when you say no comment, it means you have nothing to say about his version. But from what you have said, I think you do have something to say. And what you have to say is you have an explanation why you did not raise the issue with him. And that is, you are not the type of person who would raise this kind of issue with the minister. Is that right?
That is correct, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Chair, for that. And the final point that Mr. Kikaba makes that I'd like to raise with you is that he says he was not aware that Mr. Siyabonga Mahlangu, his special advisor, attended the meeting with you and Mr. Gupta. Do you agree or disagree with that statement?
I don't know, but I didn't tell the minister that I'm taking Siyabonga to that meeting. It was something I arranged between myself and Siyabonga.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I apologize, I didn't enter that as an exhibit. So, Chair, would it be possible to admit from page MM4 to the end of that affidavit, which is MM22, as exhibit MM7B?
Does it have annexures? No.
It does.
It does.
Yes, so it's the affidavit that begins at page 4, MM4, and the annexures end at page MM22.
Well, tell me where the annexures start first.
The annexures begin
it a 15?
from page MM17. Sorry,
What
beg
is
your pardon, that's another
what's
affidavit.
15?
It's MM14 is the end, so MM15, you're correct, Chair.
That's a confirmatory affidavit. And then there is a annexure B and annexure C. We'll have to say the statement by Mr. Malusi Knowledge Minister Kikaba, appearing at page 4. That's the notice that at page 4, the actual statement starts at page 6. But the notice and the statement will be admitted and marked as exhibit MM7. What's the letter?
That is B.
B. And that is the statement plus its annexures.
Indeed, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, that concludes the evidence on Transnet. So, Mr. Mkhwanazi, I'd just like to move to the evidence about your time at Eskom on the board, which began on June 2011 and came to an end in December 2014. And in particular, I'd like to ask you about that end part of your tenure on the board, so November, December of 2014. And in particular, I would like to ask you about this contract that Eskom had concluded with the New Age, and that was a contract for 43 million rand. Do you have any memory of that, Mr. Mkhwanazi?
Yes, I do. In terms of the documentation, is it something I must open up?
Not
of
yet.
The 3 documents?
Not yet, Mr. Mkhwanazi.
No, we can talk off the cuff, yeah.
Yes.
Maybe before you proceed, Ms. Armstrong, from what date did you become a director, a non-executive director of Eskom, to what date?
I think it was June 2011 to December 2014.
Okay, so going back to that Business Day article, you did join, you did join the board. You did join the Eskom board as a non-executive director. The only difference is that you were not removed from the Transnet board.
That is correct, Chairman.
Yes, okay, all right.
Indeed. Thank you, Chair. So the 43 million rand contract between Eskom and for advertising in the new age. So you indicate you were aware of that contract?
That is correct, Advocate. Yeah.
And do you recall that towards the end, in November and December of your tenure, 2014, on the Eskom board, you were considering that contract? Do you recall that?
That is correct. After the forensic people had finished their work, yes.
That's quite right. And that is a report by SNG. There was a forensic report done on this particular contract. Is that what you're referring to, Mr. Mkhwanazi?
That is correct, Chairman.
Do you recall in general terms what that report concluded about the contract?
At the high level, Chair, it concluded on two issues or two individuals. It concluded that the 43 million contract was irregular. And it concluded that the clause, the exit clause that was supposed to be there, which was removed by somebody, that was wrong of that somebody to do that. And it concluded that the acting CEO at the time did not have the authority to conclude that contract because there was no budget, and also there was no proper approval because such contracts above, say, 3 million were supposed to be approved by the EXCO of Eskom, and that was not done.
Thank you. And so that chief executive, that was Mr. Colin Machila, is that correct?
That is correct, Chair, yeah.
And the other individual you referred to, is that Mr. Cheu?
Yeah, it's Chose Cheu. That's
Indeed.
correct, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mkhwanazi. And so then I'd just like to move to, there were 3 board meetings that then took place towards the end of that year about this, at which this issue was discussed. I'd just like to take you, Mr. Mkhwanazi, to the very last minute, and that will require us to go to leave our file MM7 and to move to exhibit MM3. And that was the exhibit in respect of Mr. Mark Pamensky's evidence.
Yes. What page, Chair?
We'll just make sure that the chair has that file.
I don't think he had, so you must tell him again what exhibit.
Thank you. That's MM3, Mr. Mark Pamensky's evidence. Thank you.
Are you going to come back to this or not?
No, Chair. Thank you. Then if we could just turn to page 349 of this bundle.
Okay.
Did you say 349?
349, that's correct, Chair.
349.
That's right. Thank you.
When you are looking away from me,
Oh,
I won't
apologies,
hear
Chair.
you properly.
Apologies, Chair. That's correct, 349. Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
So here are the minutes of a meeting at the 8th of December 2014. Now this must have been, Mr. Mkhwanazi, right before the end of yours. This must have been one of the last board meetings you attended, is that correct?
That is correct, Chair.
Thank you, and I confirm that you were at this meeting. It says you were present, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And I just want to move to page 351. In the second last paragraph of that page, it says, the lawyers were of the opinion that Mr. Majila's conduct constituted a willful misconduct in terms of the PFMA.
I'm sorry, where about on 351 are you reading?
Sorry, Chair, it's the second last paragraph.
Oh, okay.
The first sentence. Okay. So the lawyers were of the opinion that Mr. Majila's conduct constituted a willful misconduct in terms of the PFMA. The National Treasury regulation stated that if there was a financial misconduct by an employee, then the board must ensure that an investigation was conducted and relevant disciplinary action taken. Furthermore, the board had to advise the relevant minister, National Treasury, and Auditor General thereof. In respect of a reportable irregularity, it was reported to external auditors and had to make a disclosure. And then, Mr. Mkhwanazi, you'll see the next paragraph says, with respect to the definition of fruitless and wasteful expenditure, it was stated that the board had to take a view whether the contract had value or not. So let's stop there and discuss that. So, Mr. Mkhwanazi, you mentioned earlier that the forensic report had mentioned two key actors, that was Mr. Majila and Mr. Cheu. And so, did you understand their word? Sorry, Chair.
Just give the spelling for Mr. Cheu for the convenience of the transcribers.
That is Chou.
Yeah.
Cheu. Thank you, Chair. So, in light of this paragraph about that Mr. Majila's conduct constituted willful misconduct in terms of the PFMA, did you understand that the board had an obligation to act on that information, Mr. Mkhwanazi?
That's my understanding, yes.
And that corrective action had to be taken in that regard?
That is my understanding.
Now, Mr. Majila, after this, was no longer the chief executive of the board, but do you still understand that was the board of Eskom of the view that action still had to be taken against Mr. Majila?
That's my understanding, because still he was within Eskom. I think he reverted back to a non-executive director position.
And then Mr. Cheu, he was, if I'm not mistaken, still an employee of Eskom, is that correct?
That is correct.
So was it your understanding as a member of the board that disciplinary action was going to be taken against these parties?
That's my understanding, yes.
The second point that I mentioned was fruitless and wasteful expenditure. What do you understand that to mean?
You need to go back to the actual PFMA. And in this case, it was irregular, yes, because he exceeded the delegation. They did not had an exit clause, etc. Now, whether it was fruitless and wasteful, somebody else, then a specialist in analysis of what value did the company get out of that 43 million, needs to be done. And then based on that, then the board can then define it as a fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Unless you've got somebody doing that analysis, at the time we had not done that analysis as a board.
Thank you, Mr. Kuraz. That's very important. So at this time, there'd be no analysis into commercial value of the contract.
Yes.
But did you understand that that was going to still be done at some future date?
The irregularity is a given, and the wrong clause is a given. They shouldn't have done that.
Okay.
But whether then as auditors and as an audit committee, how do you then define this? You need to apply your mind. Yes, it would have been irregular in a particular way unless regularized by a board, but then conditional regularization on condition that you take action against the two executives involved.
Okay,
Sorry.
Sorry, Chair.
As I understand it, wasteful and fruitless expenditure is when an entity's money is spent in vain, as it were. The entity doesn't derive
That is correct.
any material value from that expenditure. Would that be your understanding as well?
Chair, that is my understanding. Being a person an engineer, typically if you build a bridge and
Yes.
then you get the full payment and the bridge is not built, or even one brick is laid,
Yes.
that's fruitless and wasteful.
Yes, yes, or the bridge is built halfway so that it can't be used. That would still be
I agree,
fruitless
Chair.
and- yes, yeah.
That's fruitless and wasteful.
Okay, all right. So you're saying that what you were sure about at this stage was that this was irregular expenditure because the necessary approvals had not been obtained.
That is correct, Chair. There was no budget.
But whether it was wasteful and fruitless was something that you could only arrive at after a certain exercise had been done. And at that stage,
Is correct,
that
Chair.
exercise
Yes.
had not been done yet.
That's correct, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Chair. That's very helpful for me. So, Mr. Mkonazi, let's then turn to the next page. It's page 352. So, in the first major paragraph, the first complete paragraph, we see here that the discussion is about a decision about Majila's guilt or innocence, and there was a discussion about fruitless and wasteful expenditure. And then we see the statement halfway down the paragraph. It starts with the sentence that it's about 6 lines down. The sentence starts with, the chairman stated that the board had to be convinced that the contract was not a bad one. And then if you go on to the end of that paragraph, it says, Ms. Latuli stated that the handover report had to reflect the board had considered whether or not the contract was a bad one and had concluded that the contract was not a good one at this time. Could you just explain what do you understand by a good or bad contract meaning?
I can't explain that. Also, my understanding, it would be difficult to. It was irregular. That's it. Yeah.
Okay, so when the board talks about, and the minutes reflect that this was not a good contract, we see it in a number of places. Again, in that same page, on the second last paragraph, they were of the opinion that the contract was not a good contract. So are you saying you are not sure what that means?
To a certain extent, I know. How can you have a contract with no exit clause? That's a bad contract.
Okay, so
Yeah,
Well,
that's a bad contract.
you could have a contract without an exit clause. I'm now talking in general. Let's leave out this one. Provided when you look at its entire, you look at it in its entirety, and the value you are going to derive from it as a party to that contract is good. The value you'll derive from it is good. And you have built into the contract enough checks and balances to safeguard your interests. It happens all the time, does it not? For example, that an employer has a fixed term contract with an employee. And normally what that kind of contract means is neither the employer nor the employee can get out of that contract before the expiry of the fixed period, except if there is a breach of the contract. In the case of an employee, except if the employee misconducts himself or herself. But other than that, you are stuck there, both of you. But it may be that as an employer, you say, this employee has got very rare skills. and he or she is in high demand, they want him in other companies, so I want to secure him or her for this period. Are you more or less in agreement with that you can have that situation?
That is correct, Chair.
Yes, but you are saying in certain circumstances you need an exit clause. So that's the point you make.
Chair, that is correct, particularly in this instance, because there was an exit clause in a preliminary contract.
Yes, yes.
Then somewhere along the line, somebody decided that I don't like this exit clause.
Yes.
Then you make it a bad contract.
Yes.
And also the fact that there was no budget for this thing at all. And at that time, Eskom was experiencing financial problems. And then you go out there with no budget and you try and spend 43 million. That's a bad contract.
Of course, even with this kind of contract that I was talking about, parties might put in an exit clause, even though I normally think it doesn't make sense, but sometimes they can do that. But I think that from your point of view, the point you are making is an exit clause in this type of contract would have given you or gave Eskom in the one before some comfort that they could get out of it if there was a problem.
That's correct, Chair.
And from your point of view, the moment the exit clause wasn't there, it was a bad contract. Apart from the fact
that is correct, Chair.
Also because it was concluded when there was no budget for it, that's another reason
that
why
is correct, Chair.
You say it was a bad contract. Yeah, okay.
Thank you so much, Chair.
That is correct, Chair.
And Mr. Nkosazana, you also raised the financial position that Eskom was in at the time. You say, so when it concluded this contract, what was its financial position?
Please, it was not in a good position. We're beginning to make losses, if I recall. And also the regulator was on our neck about cutting down on expenses, et cetera, et cetera.
And this was a 53 million rand contract for advertising for a state-owned entity.
That's correct, Chair.
So in light of the financial position of Eskom at the time, could that be another reason why it was not a good contract at that time?
That is correct, Chair. Yeah.
And I emphasize that Ms. Latuli emphasizes here that it must be in the handover report to the new board. Is that your recollection?
That's my recollection because we were preparing to hand over to the new board, and which is why she insisted that that be captured.
This captured that it was a bad contract. It was not a good contract.
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask this? You have been in the boards of a number of companies, and you had been before your time at Transnet and Eskom, based on what you said earlier on. I think from the mid-1980s, you were already involved.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair.
Now, do you know of any circumstances under which a contract which has got financial implications for a company, which is concluded when there's no budget for it, would still be regarded as good?
Chair, you need to have a budget for every line expenditure in your organization.
Yes.
Yeah. That's why this frankly, was not correct.
So if there is no budget for it, it should be regarded as a bad contract.
That's correct, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Excuse me, Chair, if I can just come in there, I'm still here. Just to correct something that the council said before you intervened, Chair.
Yes.
Ms. Lutuli did not suggest that the board should hand over to the new board to say that the contract was bad. Her recommendation, rather, was that the board had considered or not, whether the contract was a bad one. So I just wanted to make sure we correct the chair so that, we don't get confused in terms of what the recommendation was in this instance.
Yes.
Let's read out the full statement.
Yeah, just read out the full statement.
So on page 352, it states, Ms. Latuli stated that the handover report had to reflect that the board had considered whether or not the contract was a bad one and had concluded that the contract was not good at this time.
At least now it has been read in full. I think the next thing would be to just double check with Mr. Mkwanazi, the witness, whether that changes anything in terms of the response that he has given.
Chairman, it does not change anything because this is a record of that last board, which then would have been handed over to the new board, which started in January 2015. And in the resolution below on that, there are clear statements that indicate that there are certain irregular things that did happen. And but the contract was bad, yes, but it's the technicality of irregular, no exit clause, no authority, etc. That must be handed over to the new board.
I understand this statement by Ms. Lutuli to mean that she was saying, let us make sure as a board that the report reflects that we as the board did consider this contract, number one. Number two, having considered this contract, or the report must reflect that having considered this contract, we concluded that this contract is not good at this time. That's my understanding of what she is saying. Is that your understanding as well, Mr. Mkwanazi?
That's my understanding, Chair.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So then, in summary, Mr. Mkwanazi, as a member of the so-called old board, before the new board had to make its decision, you've said that, am I correct, that the old board was not going to determine whether to ratify the contract or not?
Hold it at that particular meeting. But don't forget, if that old board had had one more meeting, because there was an issue of the auditors as well, putting pressure on us to fix this irregular expenditure. So the old board, in my interpretation, having articulated what needed to be done, would have ratified that contract conditionally to disciplinary action being taken against the two gentlemen who were basically the authors of this document. But that old board didn't have the time to actually come to that point because now it was handing over.
Okay, I think, Mr. Mkwanazi, your understanding of the concept of ratifying might be different from Ms. Armstrong's understanding. Now, when you say the old board, if it had time, would have ratified the contract by taking disciplinary action against the two persons concerned, is that right?
Chair, yes, it would have been a conditional ratification because don't forget, in the external auditors would have defined it fully as irregular if it has not been ratified. So you ratified that we understand it was irregular, etc., and we've taken these steps. So we now adopt it as board that this contract can continue to its termination.
Oh, okay. Maybe I was wrong to think you have a different understanding, but let me tell you what I understand when you say the old board was going to ratify the contract if conditionally if it had time.
Yeah.
Now, for me, what that means is that you were going to approve the contract. And of course, you say conditionally. We can talk about conditionally in due course.
That is correct.
Is that what you mean? Is that what you mean? That you?
That is correct, Chair.
Yes. Now, How can you say the old board was going to approve the contract when you don't know, or you didn't know what the outcome was going to be of the exercise that you talked about of establishing whether Eskom would get value out of this or not?
Chair,
In other words, let me clarify. In other words, my understanding is you would want to first find out, is this contract worth anything to Eskom? When it's worth anything serious? And if you concluded, or the exercise concluded, that Eskom is going to get no value out of this, there's no way you would approve the contract. That's what I think. But you must tell me what...
Chair, these types of contracts, particularly in the issue of marketing and marketing contracts, the definition of value is quite difficult, because you then need to quantify the number of hours that you got on exposure through television, and you must quantify it in numbers, that per flighting of an ad or anything. And also, at the time, if you recall, there was a special messaging that Eskom was going to the public with, in terms of trying to talk about load shedding and all the other things, and people saving electricity. So there was an element of value, but the issue is, was that value worth 43 million? That's the exercise that needed to be done. But there was value in Eskom trying to have this publicity in terms of what they were trying to achieve as an organization. Because they were talking about, even in the advertisements that were flighted, they would talk about illegal connections and all the other things that are wrong, which are happening out there, affecting Eskom infrastructure.
But let us assume that the board undertook that exercise of establishing what value Eskom was going to derive from this contract of 43 million. And the outcome of that exercise was that the value that Eskom was going to derive from this contract was 3 million. Isn't the position that therefore the 40 million rand would be viewed
could have been defined as
fruitless and wasteful expenditure? Is that right? You agree?
Yeah. No, not true, Chair.
Yeah. So my question then is, how do you approve the contract? How was the board going to approve the contract before doing that exercise, rather than do that exercise first? Depending on the outcome, you might approve.
Chair, there are two issues here. One is the irregular contract. That the board would have ratified. But the fruitless and wasteful part of it would have required more work to determine if there was any value that Eskom got out of that contract.
Yes. Now, if you approve the contract before you know how much value you are going to derive from the contract and whether it's commensurate with 43 million or even close to it, what happens if later on you find that the value is negligible? Aren't you in trouble for having approved it already?
Chair, there are two issues here. Maybe we're confusing issues.
Yeah, please help me.
There was a board that ended its term in December.
Yes.
We're talking about that board. I was part of that board.
Yes.
Then there's a new board that took over in January. It was chaired by Zola. By Zola. And subsequent to that, there was another board chaired by Dr. Ben Guban.
Yes.
It is those two boards that then took a different view on what to do with this contract. This board that I was part of was still evaluating the options. It didn't execute the ratification.
That I understand. I think my questions arise from your statement earlier on that if the board of which you were part had had enough time, it would have approved this contract conditionally. I think that's where that's where my questions come from. So I'm saying,
yes, Chair.
How do you say this board was going to approve conditionally before that exercise is done?
No, there are two approvals, Chair, that are needed on a contract like this. The one approval is the irregular. That we could have done, because then
the procedural,
you avoid.
That is the procedural
this board, my board could have done that, Chair.
Yes.
But the approval of Fruitless and Wasteful, even my board would not have been able to do that until a different report would have come out on what value did you get out of this contract.
Yes. I understand the two issues, and maybe we won't go further, but if I was in a board such as the one in which you were in December, is it
2014.
2014, I would say, well, before we approve anything on this contract, I want to know fully about it. Why are we getting into this contract? What are we going to get as ESCOM? That's where my questions are, because I would want to say this board must have nothing to do with this contract if I am satisfied that there is no value. I would not even want to say I approve I condone the irregularity about procedure. I would want to say this board has got nothing to do with this contract. The person who entered into it without authority must face the music. Or do you think I was going to be too harsh?
Chair, you are not too harsh, but at the time, unfortunately, these things, they get caught up with certain processes. The external auditors were putting pressure on us because they wanted to finalize the annual financial statements.
Okay.
So for that, to fix the irregularity would have been helpful. But mentioning that there is potential fruitless and wasteful expenditure coming. And it is normal in companies that it actually comes after, almost at the conclusion of the project. You then say, hold it, this project, this is the value I'm supposed to get, but I only get this value. So the difference is that, there would have been a fruitless and wasteful expenditure in another board, in another audit, to say that matter, you fix the irregularity. But fruitless and wasteful expenditure, here it is. Recognize it, because it's something PFMA wants you to articulate. Who would have done that?
Okay. But ordinarily, when, say, a group CEO approaches the board about a contract that might need to be signed, one of the things that the board would look at is what value will our entity get from this? Is that right? Even at that stage?
That is correct.
Yes, okay, thank you. Ms. Armstrong?
Thank you, Chair. So then, Mr. Mkwanazi, so I understand then, to summarize, that the board at that point had reserved its judgment on ratification. It was still exploring options. That was your testimony.
I think his testimony is on the irregular.
This was a handover board.
Yes.
Yeah, on the irregular expenditure, he says they were going to approve that.
We could have.
They could have if they had time.
Okay.
But they did not because of time.
Okay.
But the other one was still going to be investigated about fruitless and wasteful
Indeed.
expenditure. Yeah.
The fruitless and wasteful would have been dealt with following that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, the issue of the corrective action or the disciplinary action against Mr. Chew and Mr. Machila. That is also something you expected the new board to deal with.
That is correct.
Okay. And with all these very important things for the new board to consider, and an emphasis in the minutes about, at the very least, the fact that this was not a good contract being conveyed, and then also you pointed out, Mr. Mkhwanazi, in the resolutions that Ledwaba Mazwai attorneys and the company secretary were going to prepare a summary and final resolution on the discussions and the decisions around the New Age sponsorship contract for signing by the chairman of the board, chairman of the Audit and Risk Committee, for inclusion in the handover report to the new board. So all of these discussions were now going to be passed over in this handover report. Was that your understanding?
That is correct, yes.
So with all of these important considerations, would you have considered it good corporate governance to convene a live board meeting to discuss these issues before the board took further action?
Wait. Which board now to
The
consider?
new board.
My board or the new board?
The new board, when they took over, would you expect it to be good corporate governance for them to convene a meeting to discuss all of these issues?
Chair, if I may come in, Chair, and try and assist
Yes,
the process.
Mr.
Chair, one
Mkhwanazi,
of
the
the
lawyer.
confusions I think arising out of this is that the timelines between the vacating of office of the board at that time and the new incoming board was so slim that for someone who is not close to the process may actually think they were on the same board at the same time. So just for clarity, for example, Chair, Mr. Pamansky was never on the same board with Mr. Mkhwanazi. In fact, he came in, I think, 2 or 3 months after that, after the board that the old board, as you refer to, had already made their recommendations insofar as how the irregularity and the expenditure should be dealt with in that regard, Chair. So I think it would not be fair to, ask a question of that nature to Mr. Mkhwanazi, whose term at the time had already expired. So I think, Chair, it's important that we draw that line and make sure that Mr. Mkhwanazi only answers for the questions, that relate to his term of office. So whether or not it's good corporate governance for a board to have a round-robin decision, et cetera, I think that depends from board to board and organization to organization, as well as the communications policy that that particular board would have in that instance.
Yes.
So all I'm asking for, Chair, is that let's stick to the term of office of Mr. Mkhwanazi, and anything beyond that would only be supposition, Chair, and consequently would be, taking the forum's time. Thank you, Chair. That's my.
Yes, thank you. I think one concern I had with the question is you didn't lay a basis for asking for Mr. Mkhwanazi's opinion on whether it would be a good governance practice or not. So if there is no basis that is laid, there might be a problem with that.
Indeed, Chair. And the basis that I was hoping to point out to Mr. Mkhwanazi was there were so many important issues that still needed to be determined by the new board. With respect to a large contract, sponsorship with a new age, with respect to disciplinary action that had to be taken with 2 of the employees, with identifying fruitless and wasteful expenditure, and
Maybe your problem is the reference to good corporate
Indeed,
governance.
Chair.
Maybe if you just ask a question.
Indeed, what would have been, Mr. Mkhwanazi, your expectation, and perhaps as a member of the old board?
Okay, hang on. Mr. Mkhwanazi, the lawyer, I think you you understand. Maybe she's going to put the question in a different way.
Indeed, Chair.
Yes.
We will give indulgence, Chair.
Yes. Yes, okay, thank you.
Advocate Amy,
Yes,
can I respond?
yes, yes.
It's an opinion. Now, the old board had two reports, the Lidwaba Mazwai report and the Koboto report. And those reports were clear. Anybody who would have taken those two reports and read them thoroughly, now being the new board, I'm not sure how would they have arrived at a different conclusion. I'm really not sure. Now, even in terms of saying, can you do this telecon or round robin? First, you need to read the two reports before you can commit to a telecon or a round robin on an important subject like this, because it's not easy to discipline a chief executive of an organization. It's quite a process. So yes, they needed the two reports and the two conclusions before they would have taken the decision they took in June 2015 to ratify the contract, yes.
So you certainly can say they had an obligation to apply their minds to the issues that you had flagged as the old board.
Chairman, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, Mr. Nkosazana, you would have expected a handover report to contain a summary of your discussions at these meetings, as is included in this resolution. Is that correct?
I think that they were handed over. That is correct, yeah.
So I asked you earlier, Mr. Nkosazana, about this resolution in your last meeting, which stated that there needs to be a summary prepared of what had been discussed, and that would be included in the handover report. So what I'm asking is, and you would have, in addition to the two reports, the forensic and the legal report, would you have also expected that summary of your discussions in the board meetings, the opinion of the old board, to be conveyed to the new board before voting on the contract?
That is correct. That is correct, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Nkosazana. Chair, thank you. Those are our questions about from Eskom and from our side.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Nkosazana, the witness, and thank you very much to Mr. Nkosazana, the lawyer.
Thank you, Chair.
It appears that we have reached the end of the proceedings for today. Of course, I've no doubt you will come back, Mr. Nkosazana, to assist the Commission further on other matters. But for now, thank you very much to both of you, and thank you for being able to stay till late. And thank you to the Commission's legal team and everybody who has stayed on so that we could at least finalize this part of Mr. Nkosazana's evidence. On Monday, just in case the media are still here or are listening, on Monday, the Commission will hear the evidence of a former minister, Ms. Nomvula Mokonyane, in regard to allegations involving Bosasa. And during the week, we will also hear other persons who were implicated in Mr. Agrizi's evidence. And some of them are Magistrate Naya of Pretoria. I think Mr. Lindamti, who was Commissioner of Correctional Services, is scheduled also to come next week. There might be one or two others. Mr. Vincent Smith was meant to come, but arrangements have been made. He has been released. He will come some other time. And I think on Friday, I'll hear evidence from Judge Makubela of the High Court in relation to PRASA matters. So I thought I must just indicate that so that where we are able to, we indicate which witnesses we will be having and which work streams we will be dealing with. Okay?
Thank
We
you,
are
Chair.
going-
Sorry, could I just hand up that Business Day clear version of the
Oh,
article? Thank you.
yes,
So that our
yes.
files are complete.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Nkonazia, you would have had an electronic
Chairman.
version.
Thank you, Chair.
I've got an electronic copy.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. we
Thank you, Chair.
adjourn.
Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. We adjourn.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Mr. Nkonazia. Thank you.
Rev, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay.
Kate? Yeah. Kate? CJ would like to say. At least we've got some time.
Thank you.